Food and Wine Insider is a weekly look at a $1.5 trillion industry touching every American. Devoted to the business of purveying food and decanting wines, Food and Wine Radio is a unique program highlighting not food recipes or wine vintages, but how to make a profit while satisfying America's palates. In this competitive but highly rewarding sector, many men and women have made profits while fulfilling a dream. Food and Wine Insider is all about better managing any business involving food and wine. Each week, your co-hosts sit down with successful restaurateurs, food mavens, winery vintners, store owners, food suppliers, and other leaders in the worldwide industry that centers on foodstuff and wine. In frank give-and-take sessions, guests and panelists talk about the business of bringing healthy and pleasurable foods and wines to others. Your Food and Wine Radio host are Ann Daw, former president of the Specialty Food Association and a longtime food executive who has held senior positions both here and abroad with Kraft Foods and Philip Morris. Don Mazzella, a nationally known business commentator. On each show, they invite leaders of the world's culinary and wine industries to share the secrets of their success. Visit us at foodandwineinsider.com.
Ray Johnson is the Executive Director of the Wine Business Institute at the School of Business and Economics at Sonoma State. It's about time that the United States has an institute devoted to the business of wine, and he's here today to talk about his institute, where they're going, and an event that's upcoming. Ray, welcome to the program.
Don, thank you very much for having me on.
Well, Ray, first off, I'll ask one question, then turn it over to Ann. What is the Wine Business Institute, and what is its goals?
The Wine Business Institute at Sonoma State University is a research and educational arm of the university where our focus is entirely on the business of wine. All of our programs have that emphasis, and the idea that our industry leaders brought to us over 20 years ago was they needed a place where they could send the next generation to study and prepare for taking over their current wine businesses. And that's what we've created. We have a wine MBA program, one of the most delicious MBAs in the world, and that's what we focus on.
And I'm going to turn it over to you, as you are the wine maven in this group.
Thanks, Don. Ray, welcome to the show. You've written about wine, food, and the destinations where these passions intersect since really 1980. Can you talk about your journey?
Yes, I became really fascinated with wine working in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, while I was going to Pitt as an undergraduate. I worked in a series of successively more expensive and more highly involved French restaurants, and of course in a French restaurant, wine plays a very important component and to the guest experience. And boy, I just fell in love with wine, and I had a few vacation trips to California, and I said, this is where I need to be. I really need to get into the wine business. And so I moved to California in the mid-'80s, and it was the best decision I could have made. I started working at Christian Brothers with an entry-level job as a tour guide and worked my way up from there, and eventually came into wine education, and now at Sonoma State, focusing on the business of wine and how companies go to market and create a new brand and remain competitive in today's market. Boy, consumers have choices from all over the world. So it's just a fascinating subject, and we're right here in the heart of wine country, not very far from the coast to the beautiful Pacific Ocean.
Sonoma is a very beautiful area of the country. I wonder if you could share with us your favorite story about wine, whether it was a learning experience or something that happened to you in your story of wine.
Well, I have to say it's seeing how people have pulled together to make something happen, whether it's a wine region where everyone gathers together to take their message to market. Off the air we were talking about how other countries have done that. And we do that in the United States, and likewise here in the north coast of California, the leaders came together and said, we need a school where we can send people to study wine business. And it really, I just marvel at the foresight and the willingness of people to work together to create something big like that, and raise almost $10 million to create a new building. It's just it's something I'm in awe in and really delighted by.
And I want to turn to that because the Wine Spectator Learning Center at Sonoma State University will have its grand opening on May 29th. Talk about the significance of this event in the history of wine for the U.S.
It's I would quote something Marvin Shanken said at the groundbreaking, and it was the idea that even years ago he knew that the next stage in the wine industry and the wine community's growth would have to be through studying wine business. We've done a great job at creating institutions to know and master the science of growing grapes and making great wine. But it's a very competitive market, and simply making great wine is not enough. That's just really the barrier to entry. You need to make great wine, or don't even go to market, right? But even with great wine, that's no guarantee that you're going to be successful as a business. There are just so many choices for the consumer today. So to have a place, a home for all things wine business, I think that is really significant. It's a step in the industry's evolution that really marks a recognition of the need to be a very competitive and well thought out business to succeed in the wine industry today.
So this institute or the Learning Center has been 2 decades in the making. What is it going to include in terms of education, this whole area of business of wine?
I think the big change and the big upgrade for us is the ability to communicate with students across distances and across time. So in the new building, we will have all the latest technology, and what that makes available is the opportunity for students across the country or across the world to study with us more easily. We've had a number of students over the years who've traveled from New York to study with us in California in our Executive Wine MBA program every other week when the classes were held. And now with our new program beginning in the fall, a hybrid MBA program that combines online learning and projects with in-person experiences, there'll be fewer trips to California, but people can stay closely connected with their fellow students from wherever they are in the world. And we think that's really going to be a game changer for people's ability to participate in a wine MBA, and also, I would say, for the winemakers and viticulture managers here, the vineyard managers who sometimes really have an intense schedule during harvest, right? You see how it is. People are working around the clock. And to have more online learning available for them, they'll be able to keep up with the class and be able to balance their work and their life and their education more easily.
So do they learn things about supply chain and sourcing and obviously agriculture? Is it that comprehensive?
It really is, and finance. We know that the windows for cash flow are much longer in the making of wine and bringing a wine to market than they are for beer and other beverages, especially if you choose to really invest all the way along the value chain. You plant a vineyard, you make the wine, you bring it to market. Look at how many years are involved there. So, there are other ways, of course, to go to market more quickly. You buy grapes, you buy existing wine, you create a brand. But it's important to know what all those options are, because they require cash flow and good management of that cash flow. So people really leave the program with a great understanding of how to manage their cash flow and how to plan for the events that naturally occur in the cycle of bringing wine to market such that they can be successful.
That's just good business, because if you don't have, even for food businesses, if you don't have good cash flow, it's the thing that will kill your business. So it's not
That's
just being
so
able
true.
to sell it, but be able to pay your bills, be able to have money to invest, and all of those things. Don, did you have a question?
Oh, I have lots of questions about my first one, but I'm just going to do one, which is what will be the who will be the students for this institute? I mean, will they need special background? Will you take novices? What is your criteria to be a student?
Yes, so all of the above, because we have different programs available for people at different levels. So for the novice who, let's say, is working on let me back up. For the wine enthusiast who's working on Wall Street but doesn't never has worked at a winery or understands the wine business, or someone who has a marketing position or is an architect in Manhattan, they could have a great passion for wine, but not really have studied the business of it. So we have for them an online program in wine business management that allows people to learn actually how a wine business functions. That they can take at a distance, and it provides them the opportunity to see the business side of the wine, because it's not just standing around tasting wine all day, as we know. You really have to run a company. And then for the people with 8 years of experience or more working in the wine business, we have an executive wine MBA, and those people start at a higher level so they can go more deeply into solving the business problems that they face in their particular organizations. So something available for every level of understanding of the wine business.
Back to you, Ann.
Thanks, Don. So Ray, what is your vision for this learning center in terms of what it will mean to the wine industry in the U.S.?
So for us, our vision is to be the global leader in wine business research and education. And closer to home, our mission is creating extraordinary learning experiences for our students, and really creating a nucleus, a hub of activity for wine education. And in the North Coast, that's been particularly important. So this spills out in economic value across the country, and in particular in California, where the wine industry is very important, not only for the wines that are created, but also for the tourism that flows from that, and the experiences that people have when they come here to visit in California, and when they visit wine regions throughout the nation, like the beautiful Finger Lakes up in New York, and other regions that we know about, that the three of us have visited. Those regions, as well as those in Northern California, really thrive and benefit from the tourists who come and get close and have a firsthand experience of wine in those places.
And how many educators are involved in the institute itself?
So we have 8 full-time faculty who research and teach with us, on a daily basis, and then we have over 24 wine industry professionals who come in and share their experience from their day-to-day operations running their companies. And we find this combination of the academic researchers and the everyday practitioners, if you will, the people running their companies. It's a great combination for the students.
And, I'm going to shift a little bit gears to the wine industry itself. And could you talk a little bit about how the wine industry has evolved and what the future role of American winemakers in the world market for wine will be?
Well, it's an incredibly competitive market. The American market is the largest wine market in the world, and everyone wants to be here. So even for the producer in the United States who isn't interested in export, the people from other countries are very interested in exporting into our market. So one has to be competitive and cognizant of that, whether you're selling your California and New York wine in Canada, or whether you're selling it in your local market or within your own state. So we find the competitive landscape has really heightened, and as such, people not only have to be conscious of controlling costs and running good business, just like you had talked about earlier, Ann, across the food industry, but also in terms of designing consumer experiences that really differentiate their wines and their wineries. So we spend a lot of time in the curriculum talking about how one makes an incredible wine experience. And it's vital today, even if you've been a success for decades, and you're a brand that has created a legacy of luxury and great quality wine, you still have to remain relevant to the next generation of consumers, so they get involved and want to visit and become loyal customers as well.
You know, you made a very important point that the U.S. is the largest consumer of wine, which is interesting all by itself. However, Italy, France, and Spain are still the largest producers of wine, and the U.S. ranks fourth in the production of wine. Do you think this suggests an opportunity for American wines and the potential for more vintners, or do you see a continued desire for differentiation and experimentation by the consumer to like wines from many different parts of the world?
I think there is opportunity. We have a program in wine entrepreneurship, and I see the new ideas that people come to bring to market. And if they're well thought out and well planned and well capitalized, they can be successful. So I do think there is room for new American producers, and not just in California, but throughout the country. And of course, we welcome folks to come and study with us from wherever they are located. Getting a good grounding in wine entrepreneurship is vital if you want to be successful. But I would also I want to extend that across the country. You see the interest of consumers who want to who want to support their local agriculture. And in some regions, that has been cows and pigs, if you will. But in other places, it's the growing of really, great grapes to make great wine. I cited the Finger Lakes earlier as a great example. People consumers get very excited about supporting their local vintners, and that allows the opportunity for people who have a good idea and make good wine and differentiate it to come to market. And so I think the opportunity is still there. It's competitive, but it is still there for new wine ventures in America.
Terrific. And do you, the whole sense that it seems to me in the wine industry, people are interested in sharing with one another, and I feel like I see that across the globe. Do you see more collaboration among the different countries on the production of fine wines? And maybe you could share a story about where it's been successful.
Yes, you see that certainly in the cooperative arrangements that have occurred with the Antinori family and St. Michel Estates, with the properties that they have in Washington and in California, and their cooperation in the very famous winery Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. So they're able to bring together the expertise from different places, and also allows them to create new wines that weren't thought of before, because they're bringing the story of two different places together, bringing together Italy and North America, and it really can create some great wines and also some great stories for people to share. And the other place I see the collaboration is in the networks that the students create when they study together. We were just talking the other day about how Stanford is to Silicon Valley in terms of engineering, what we are to the North Coast wine industry in California. It's an opportunity for every student who enters the program and spends a year and a half with us to get connected with a larger network of people working in the wine business. They each bring their networks, so they create this incredible support system for each other's careers as they go forward.
It's an interesting point, because I was wondering if your students, do they tend to be younger? Do they tend to be people who have been in business? Do they tend to be, I'm just curious as to, is it younger people sort of having this interest in the wine business and wanting to learn more and maybe creating an orchard, or at least understanding the supply chain? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we really do see every age group. We have undergraduates who concentrate in wine business in their business studies. So they're really at that age of 20, 22 years old. But then we also have people who've been running their companies for quite a long time in their 50s who come back and study with us and see a wine MBA as really the next great step in either raising their career or going up to the next level in their career, or for learning more about running the business that they have. So we really do have quite a spectrum of people across the ages.
And let's talk a little bit about the consumer. I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on the millennial wine consumer. Are they different from past generations? Do they have a different palate? Do they have a different way of approaching wine? What is the way to get them interested in wine?
Yes, our faculty have done a lot of research in this area, and it's fascinating to see that it not only is millennials, but then different segments of millennials, depending upon their age and their buying capacity at their stage in their career and their lives. So we do see different trends then, and one I would point to that is of particular interest to everyone is what's called the beverage promiscuity, the interest of them in trying and experimenting and enjoying many different beverages, so that one not only has a glass of white wine and then a glass of red, but might have a cocktail and then move on to wine after that, and perhaps a craft beer after that. So it's been a great opportunity for the wine business to learn about, and what do you want to, I would say, expanding the choices available to consumers. So there's more depth of experience there. And yeah, it's definitely a group and a segment that likes variety.
And how many students do you think you'll be enrolling in this first class?
So in the first online program that we have coming in the fall, we would like to enroll 20 to 25. Each of our groups of executive MBA students is right in that range. We find 25 is a really good number for them to work together and facilitate a great class.
Terrific. So for you, what are some of the lessons learned you'd like to pass on to anyone wanting to get into the wine business?
Well, most importantly,
there may be a lot of them, so please go.
Well, most importantly, to know that it's not enough to simply make great wine. You have to have a well thought out business plan. And what many of my friends who guest lecture in our classes say and strongly advise is know where you're going to sell that wine before you ever make it. And as one of my colleagues has said to me, if I meet someone who says, you know, I have a path, I have these restaurants in New York, and I have these retail shops here, and I also have these people who would buy direct, then I know that person has thought about where that wine is going to end up. But when we meet somebody who's dreamy-eyed and says, you know, I would just love to live in the Napa Valley and make great wine, that's not a path to market. So that's the biggest thing I would suggest is think about that route to market before you ever make that first wine.
No, that's really excellent advice. Now, you yourself, you earned your master's in wine business from University of Adelaide in South Australia. How is it different, the Australian business to the California business? I realize they're very different countries, obviously, but what would you say? Because Australia sort of came on the map quite interestingly in the whole area of wine, and you know, I'd be curious to know why did you go to South Australia for that education, and have you brought anything from your learning there to what you're doing today?
Yes. At the time, Sonoma State did not yet have the graduate program, so that's why I went to Australia. And I'm glad I did. Your question about the difference in the countries, it is significant. And so it was a great experience for me to be able to see that. The primary driver, if you look at Australia historically, has been the need to export, whether it be back to England, the mother country, so to speak, or other parts of the world. They did not have a wine drinking culture in that country, and they're so far away from the rest of the world. So they really had to learn how to develop an export route to market to have any chance of success, and that is what they had done, and they've done it very well. And you see how New Zealand has done that quite effectively, in particular with their delivery of Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir to the world. And one of the things we do in the Executive Wine MBA program to capitalize on these sorts of learnings is to always have international trips as part of the program. So our most recent cohort of students spent March in, not the entire month, but 2 weeks of March in Bordeaux and Croatia to see how people go to market there and how they're marketing their wines around the world. And it was fascinating lessons to learn and opportunities to see the differences and similarities of what we do. So I think those international experiences are just really important for everyone. I've benefited from it, and our current students do as well.
You know, I have a feeling that people listening to this program will all want to come to your learning center. And what's the criteria for being able to be a student? What are you looking for?
So it depends on the level in the program they would like to get into. If they want to be an Executive Wine MBA student, they would need at least 8 years of progressive wine industry experience. So they would be at a level to communicate with the other students in the class. For something as easy as our wine business management certificate that's available online, there someone who's a complete novice but a wine enthusiast could come to the program and bring their passion for wine, but they wouldn't need to know anything about the business of wine. And we run a segment of that program at a level that can bring people up to speed on the business side very easily.
You know, Ray, I have so many more questions to ask you, but I'm going to turn it back to Don. It's been delightful to have you on the program. And Don, can we wrap it up?
Mm-hmm. But first, Ray, your website and how people can reach you and your online programs and everything?
Yes, sonoma.edu/winebiz. That's sonoma.edu/winebiz. And you can see everything we have ongoing there in terms of the programs available for people who wish to study the business of wine, and then also about our grand opening on May 29th, our big celebration to open the doors of the Wine Spectator Learning Center.
We've been talking with Ray Johnson. He's Executive Director of the Wine Business Institute at the School of Business and Economics at Sonoma State. Ray, it has really been a pleasure and eye-opening, even for a teetotaler like me.
That's great. I appreciate you both having me on the show, and I wish you a great weekend.
Thank you.
You too. To be successful, most restaurant owners require extra capital from time to time. When you need funding to renovate, buy equipment, or manage cash flow, you don't have time to track down financial statements or wait weeks for a decision. That's where Cabbage can help. Cabbage gives small businesses access to a line of credit of up to $200,000. Apply online and you'll get a decision right away. Since Cabbage is a line of credit, you can take the exact amount you need. You never have to reapply to take additional loans, and you'll only pay for the funds you use. Cabbage has helped more than 230,000 businesses from every industry. And with $4 billion in funding, Cabbage is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau and was named the Forbes Top 100 Companies twice in a row. Check out Cabbage at cabbagewithak.com/food and wine, and you'll get a $50 gift card when you qualify. That's KABBAGE.com/food and wine.
Line of credit is subject to credit approval. See terms and conditions. All Cabbage business loans are issued by Celtic Bank, a Utah chartered industrial bank, member FDIC.
You know, Ann, at one point, Ellenville was the center of the Catskill Mountain resorts that were famous for the Borscht Belt, etc. Ellenville fell on some tough times as the places like Grossinger's and Nevele went under, but now there's a revival. It's also a revival in good dining, and here to talk about it is Joseph Cafaro, who's the chief chef at Tony and Nick's Kitchen in Ellenville. Welcome to the program, Joseph.
Hey, thank you for welcoming me. I'm very excited to be talking.
Joseph, tell us a little bit about your background, then I'm going to turn it over to Ann. But now there's a revival. It's also a revival in good dining. And here to talk about it is Joseph Cafaro, who's the chief chef at Tony and Nick's Kitchen in Ellenville. Welcome to the program, Joseph.
Hey, thank you for welcoming me. I'm very excited to be talking. I'm very excited to share some info about Ellenville.
Well, okay, Joseph, tell us a little bit about your background, then I'm going to turn it over to Ann.
Okay, so I've personally been living in Ellenville for more than a decade now. I went to the local high school and graduated from there, and basically my career started here in Ellenville as well. I started working at a local deli, and then I worked at a couple of the restaurants in town. At one restaurant, I met my mentor chef. I worked with him at a couple of restaurants with him, followed him as a sous chef. And then my dad decided to open up his own restaurant in Ellenville, and I joined the team here, and I've been at the helm here for the past 2 years, almost 3 years now. And I'm excited to be leaving the helm to my brother-in-law, Dash Stratton, and I will be moving on to Kingston, but I still have some touch in Ellenville as well. I can never leave Ellenville fully. But that's a quick summary of my story with Tony and Nick.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to Ann now.
Okay, thank you, Don, and welcome again, Chef. You're the head chef of a business called Tony and Nick's Italian Kitchen. So who are Tony and Nick?
So Nick is my father's father, my grandfather, and Tony is just one of his great friends that he's had since childhood. So my father decided to name the restaurant after both of them.
And were they from the area? Were they from Ellenville, or were you all from a different part of New York?
I was born in Long Island. My parents were born in Manhattan or Brooklyn, and that's basically where I started being grown up, is in Long Island. And then my parents decided to move upstate. They loved the beauty of the area, the culture. So throughout maybe like my middle school years and on, I've been up here.
You know, if there's one thing we have a lot of in New York, it's Italian restaurants. Can you talk a little bit about what makes Tony and Nick's Italian Kitchen so unique?
So what's different about Tony and Nick's is I'm trying to come up with my own name for the type of Italian we are, because we're not your generic Italian restaurant found in America, which is like the most populated restaurant in America. We are more of like actually dishes that you'll find in Italy and inspirations from the local towns and the regionality of Italy. When you go to Italy and dine there, it's just a complete different experience, and these Italian restaurants just do not show any of it. It's definitely very surprising as well, and my dishes come from my personal trip to Italy, countless research of actual Italian dishes, and I just try to stray away from stuff that I know is very generic.
Okay. Now, when you talk about the regions of Italy, I've been to Italy as well, and every region of Italy has its sort of specialty. I don't want to generalize and say, Milan is different than Rome, is different than Sicily, is different than Valencia, is different than Sardinia, and so on and so forth. But when you talk about Italy and the foods, is there one particular town or place that you feel, wow, I think our food really reflects this area?
Yeah, actually, there's one area that actually stole our hearts when we went, me and my family, is the Piedmont area.
Okay.
Piedmont is where some of the famous wines like Barolo, Barbaresco, like those are coming from, and I feel as if they have a similar style to the Hudson Valley, because a lot of cattle is in there, a lot of like farmland is there. They're doing tons of wine. They're doing tons of cheese there, making so much cheese. Gorgonzola comes from the Lombardy region.
Mm-hmm.
as well as the Piedmont region. And the awesome thing about the food is, yes, you're correct. Every region has its own traditions and dishes, but a tiny bit of it bleeds into the other towns next door and nearby. Like you could go to Piedmont is about an hour and a half away from France. It's very close to the French border, and you could see a lot of French influence in dishes up near there. And then if you go to the other side of Italy, where Venice is, you do not see that at all, and you see more influence from Greece and Mediterranean. So
wonderful. And you have a lot of live entertainment at your restaurant. Talk a little bit about how important that is to, bringing guests into your establishment.
So one thing that I've noticed about live entertainment over the years, I've done it at many restaurants I've worked at, and I've actually seen performers at the same performers perform at multiple restaurants I've worked at. And it's definitely a great sense of community because it mostly attracts locals, and you get to know everyone's face, talk to them, become friendly with them, see them every time the performer comes. Every time there's a new performer, everyone gathers around. It's a great time, and definitely very community, bringing community together.
So you're really appealing to your local community. What would you say you really know about your guests in terms of what they're looking for in the dining experience?
Well, one thing that really stuck with me, a fellow restaurateur told us a few years ago, is that you have to acclimate to your clientele or your guests. You can't just do what you want to do in one specific area and expect everyone to love it. Everyone's different. So over the couple years of the restaurant being open, it's been so much trial and error, and we've built so many relationships and learned that it's really all about the guest and the guest experience. And we just want to be able to make everyone a good plate, no matter who they are, what they like, what they hate. And I feel like we've definitely done a very good job at that, and I'm very happy where the menu has come from that.
So how would you describe your particular guest? Is there a particular demographic? Is there a particular sort of style? Just curious.
You could split it in half. Year round we have locals. We love our good friends, our local community. But around when we start having plays and a bunch of hiking around the areas, we get a bunch of out-of-towners, people from the city, people from Brooklyn, people from all over, because we're becoming more of a destination spot up here. And so those are the two halves I split in, is out-of-towners and locals, and we just love them all. Everyone appreciates us for what we do. We have a little something for everybody.
Okay. You have a fairly broad selection of beers. I know you talked a little bit about wine earlier. Talk a little bit about that. Why is there this broad selection of beers? Was it a reaction to what your guests were looking for, or is it something you really felt was important in terms of pairing with the food that you provide?
So, yeah, definitely my family, we love wine, we love beer. My brother-in-law also brews his own beer. We didn't open with as much beer as we have, not even close. We opened with 6 tap lines and a few bottles of Italian beer, and we've definitely quadrupled that. We added 7 more tap lines, so we have a total of 13. We have almost 100 different bottles of beer or cans of beer to choose from, and we just started becoming this place known in town for just great draft beer. We always, at least half of our beers from local breweries, whether it's cans or draft, and people come specifically if we're tapping a specific beer from a brewery that's 20 minutes away, and we've kind of become known for that.
It's interesting because I always hear that for restaurants, they make more money on selling drinks than they do necessarily on selling food. How does that work for you? What's the proportion of sort of drink revenue to food revenue for your business?
That is definitely true in some areas. We didn't start with our full liquor license when we opened. We just got that, and it's almost been a year since we had our full liquor license. We just originally served wine and beer. So definitely we were more food driven at the time and starting to balance out. But yeah, from a bunch of people I talk to and from a bunch of areas I see and restaurants or bars I go to, it's definitely a lot focused on the alcohol sales. And people pay.
And so proportionately, what would you say is the proportion of revenues or sales from the beverage side versus the food side of the business?
I mean, that's depends on what restaurant you're like, what kind of restaurant or bar you're talking about, because it could be just a cocktail bar, just a wine bar with some tapas, light food, just a small tiny menu where that would be mainly driven by the cocktails and the wines. But a restaurant like ours,
right,
we focus a lot on food, maybe a little bit more on food than the bar and the drinks. So ours is definitely higher up in the food compared to a place like that.
Okay. All right. So who's involved in the business? Who's involved in running the business?
So it's definitely a very family affair. My dad obviously opened the business, Tony and Nick's. He's the owner of Tony and Nick's with my mother, and she also manages the restaurant. My younger sister, when she's not in college, she just started college this year. She also works in the restaurant in the front of the house. My brother-in-law, he's, like I said, going to take over Tony and Nick's. He's going to be the chef and basically manager of the restaurant. And my dad also works front of the house bar and is going to be general manager of our new restaurant. So it's definitely a close family affair. We also have very close friends helping us and working with us. We definitely build up relationships with our employees too, and basically bring them into the family, I should say.
You know, it's I'm sure you've heard this, that 80 to 90% of restaurants fail. And you've been in business how long now?
It's coming up on 3 years. It would be at the end of this summer.
And you're opening a second restaurant, so that's fairly unusual. How far away is the second restaurant from the first restaurant?
Second restaurant's probably about 35 miles away, a 45-minute drive. I'm going to be personally relocating into the Kingston area for the second restaurant. So.
And for you, what's the toughest part of running the restaurant?
I'm beginning to realize I can cook, and I'm not really worried about my cooking, but it's really getting that relationship with the staff and the guests. That's what I feel is the hardest part to get, is building up the trust of your staff, the trust of your guests, having the community trust you, and building that relationship with everybody. That's what I feel is the hardest part for me.
And are your employees, do they tend to stay, have they stayed with you, or do they tend to be transient? Because that can disturb sort of a way of trying to build team, right?
Yeah, definitely, and that could vary from town to town. I mainly worked in Millennial, but I worked in a couple other towns, and definitely there is a higher turnover rate in Ellenville. So we've started relying more on kids still in high school, like maybe their last couple years of high school, and they can help us and whatnot. They can't do much because they're still under the age of 18, but we definitely rely on them a lot because they're a better mindset than some of the other people who live around here, I should say. But I'm excited and nervous at the same time to see the way the Kingston community is and how they can work out my kitchen and the floor.
What's making you nervous about that?
Because I personally never worked inside the Stockade district in Kingston before in a kitchen, so I don't know how the workforce is around there, the labor force.
John, do you have any questions for Joseph?
Yes, I do, and I'm just curious. I didn't quite hear an answer on it, but why did you decide to open a second restaurant? Obviously, your first must be working well. What made you decide to do the second?
So around late December, early January, a random offer came up for us to take over a restaurant which the owners they were closing the restaurant and wanted to sell the building. And after some thought, we realized we have the manpower. We have two chefs. We want to show more people what we're trying to do, show more people our passion. We feel like we could do that by stepping into Kingston. We've definitely made a lot of mistakes here in Ellenville, and I'm happy we did. So now when we start in Kingston, it's sort of a new start, and we can definitely make a bigger impact. I'm not saying that Tony Nicks doesn't, but there's a bigger population in Kingston, and I just really want to share our passion and what we believe more.
Is your menu going to be much the same as your Ellenville menu?
There's definitely going to be some items that are favorites here at Ellenville that I'm going to bring over, but we're changing the style a little bit. In Ellenville, we do personal pizzas, like rustic stone-fired pizzas, but we're not doing pizzas in Kingston. And we also are making our own fresh pasta in Kingston. All of our pasta is going to be made in-house. So it's definitely slightly different, but definitely, my style is no different than from Ellenville to Kingston. So.
Well, like many restaurants, you're across from a playhouse, the Shadowland Theater, which is a center of arts in Ellenville. How do you work with them to kind of promote your restaurant and also generate business?
Yeah, like I said about the live music, I've been working in Ellenville a lot, and I've seen it at every restaurant, as well as I've seen the effect of the theater on all the restaurants. The theater is definitely one of the main reasons why this restaurant growth and life in Ellenville is where it's at. The Shadowland, I can't thank enough for how much business it helps us. The Shadowland, every single play they have all year, opening night, they have like a little party, a cocktail hour after the show, where they go and they'll do one at each restaurant in town. So every restaurant gets a chance to be promoted through that. We also offer discounts on desserts as well as late night drinks after the play. So as well as advertising of the play itself, commercials or playbills, they definitely put the local town in there, and it's definitely a great relationship.
Well, do you have a similar thing in Kingston, or are you going to try something different?
Well, there's a lot of venues in Kingston, a lot of more areas of entertainment in Kingston. There's not theater directly across the street, but there's definitely a lot more options, and I'm very excited about the weekly farmers markets that happen this summer, as well as they also happen not as often in the winter, but that's directly in front of our restaurant, so I'm very excited for that every Saturday.
Back to you, Ann.
Thanks so much. I'm going to return to something you were saying a little bit earlier, Chef. You talked about mistakes that you've made along the way, or I kind of like to refer to them as lessons learned. What were some of the big ones that I think our listeners would really like to hear about, so that if they're thinking about, the restaurant business, it's a great watch out? What would be some of the mistakes that you feel like, wow, if I had to do it over again, I would have done it this way?
Definitely our original menu. It did not receive well with the community. Our original menu wasn't designed by me, but when I definitely had my chance to change it, is when definitely the positive changes. A year after we opened, we had people who said that they were never going to come back because their first experience was horrible, and some of those people are now regulars who come week by week. They have events here, and we've definitely built great relationships with them, and it's definitely nice to have the community as a critique to say, because that is the best way we've grown, is because who else to tell your flaws in the people who you're performing the service for. So I would say maybe one of our biggest mistakes maybe was an all-you-can-eat shellfish event. Just the way we priced it and how many people we did, it was just way more shellfish than I thought we were going to sell. We ended up going through like 2 bushels of clams, 80 pounds of mussels, and it was just so much that we basically just evened out at the end of the day.
Yeah, I definitely would have been there for an all you can eat shellfish.
Yeah.
So that was on that side. What are some of the biggest successes thus far? What are the things that you're really proud about?
I'm very proud about our menu and our specials menu. Every week we have, on top of our menu, we have at least 5 appetizers and 5 entree specials. And definitely, I'm so excited when I bring in foods that I personally came up with that nobody around here has seen, and people are eating it and loving it, and definitely want me to do more of that. We also, once in a while, we do special dinners, which are tasting dinners, which is when I'll come up with like 6 courses, price it for like $60, and people come in and they'll try all 6 courses. We have the option to pair it with wines, and it's where we're closed for regular service, and I get to focus just on this tasting dinner, and it goes great, and everyone applauds me, and I tear up, and I think those are some of the greatest success moments we had.
Awesome. Let me ask you this. Do you, on a nightly basis, do you walk the floor? Do you come out and do you greet your guests?
I definitely on a nightly basis come out on the floor. I love seeing the familiar faces. There's always someone I know on the floor. Get to talk with them about the new restaurant, about this restaurant, about their lives. It's great. I grew up as a shy person, and it's definitely helping me get out of that shell I was in as a child.
And you know, one of the more important things, because obviously cost is an important area to control in the restaurant business, and part of that is not only waste and trying to minimize waste of the food, but also wages. And how has the minimum wage affected your business, if at all?
It's definitely like I've learned a lot with wages from being someone who's gotten them to now someone giving them. And when I did, it was $8 an hour. I was making $8 an hour doing work, but people are now making at least $11 an hour for now. And I personally believe that it's better to pay these people $11, $12, $13, $14 an hour and give them a stable life while they're working here, as opposed to just trying to get people for as cheap as possible. And I definitely believe that has an effect on the restaurant's turnover rate as well. And I believe a better team leads to better food just because the passion's there. So.
And what advice would you give to someone who's thinking of getting into the restaurant business? What should they be prepared for?
I definitely think it's great to find a mentor who you respect and appreciate. A lot of people you work next to coming up, I think everyone has their own idea of what's right and what's wrong and what path you should take. I think you should focus on taking your own path. One thing I specifically remember hearing growing up is you don't have to go to culinary school, you don't have to go to culinary school, you don't have to go to culinary school. Every chef would talk about that, or cook. And I would excel in the kitchen, and a few years later, these people are starting to apply my restaurant to work under me. And I see it's just you can't let other people influence you that you're working with. A lot of people can be bad apples, and they could leech life out of you in the kitchen, and you just got to work past that.
I guess, is there something that you would like to talk about that I haven't asked you about and said, boy, I really would like people to know this about Tony and Nick's Italian Kitchen?
One thing I would like to talk about is, like I said earlier about our version of Italian food, is we're really trying to bring the culture and the regionality of Italy to the Hudson Valley. We really want it to be based on like the local businesses and local community, and that's just really, at the end of the day, what we're all about. It's one of the most things we appreciate in Italy, and we just want to replicate it in our home area in the Hudson Valley.
All right. Don, anything else from you?
No, Joseph Cafaro, the name of your restaurant, your website, and how people can reach you?
So the name of the new restaurant will be Palizzata, which is the Italian word for stockade, and we thought it'd be clever to name that in Stockade District of Kingston. Our website's very simple. It's just palizzata.com. There's 2 Z's in that. And right now, the building's under construction. Palizzata.
And your current restaurant?
That's Tony and Nick's ItalianKitchen.com.
And one's in Ellenville, New York. The other's in...
Tony and Nick's is in Ellenville. Palizzata will be in the Stockade District of Kingston.
Well, Joseph, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Joseph, and all the best, and best of luck in the new with the new restaurant.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
Want to know more about health savings accounts for your company or yourself? Go to 2hsa.com and get a free employer's primer. Health savings accounts are a cost-effective way of offering health care benefits to your employees and yourself. HSAs build retirement funds for your employees, improve morale, and reduce your health care benefit cost. For a free employer guide to HSAs, go to 2hsa.com. That's 2hsa.com.
Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz with your featured book. I want to tell you about a recent interview I had with Bob Bethel, a turnaround specialist with lots of success in small business. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. He tells us of his life successes and failures that have made him and his clients so successful. Over the years, Bob has brought 77 companies back from the brink and changed them into thriving, profitable businesses. His energy is amazing, and at 74, he proves that you can still have a great deal to give others if you just try. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. One insight struck me was that most companies do not have a plan. The old Chinese proverb says, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there, is true today. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. This has been Dan Perkins with your Recalculating.biz featured book.
You know, Ann, do you think it's harder or easier nowadays to get into the food and wine business?
I think there are still fairly low barriers to entry into the food business. Part of the reason for this is there continues to be excess capacity. In other words, in most cases, you can find a contract packer to produce your product. Of course, this might not give you a great deal of flexibility in the type of packaging you may want to use, but most specialty producers use co-packers so that they aren't consumed with trying to make the product, but instead can focus on selling the product to retailers or to food service buyers. Of course, you still need money, and most entrepreneurs would admit that they have fully borrowed from friends and family. Today, however, there are so many other ways to raise capital. There's GoFundMe, there's crowdsourcing, there's angel investors, and this gives new entrepreneurs every chance to get their products to market. The important thing to me, however, is not to lose sight of the differentiation of the product in the marketplace and its relevance to your particular target audience. What is your unique selling proposition? What will consumers use your product instead of? Why will they believe your product fits into their life? Have you paid attention to sustainability? Do you support a greater good? Today, consumers want it all. Great taste, by the way, nothing else matters, convenience, a clean ingredient line, a real person behind the product, and a sense that you are providing them something they cannot get anywhere else. Experiment in as many channels as possible. Get the repeat orders coming and stay passionate about what you're doing. Oh, and be sure to make some money at it, because if you're ever thinking about selling the business, that's one of the important questions. Not only your passion, but can you make money in the business? Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Food and Wine Insider with Ann Daw and Don Mazzella. Want to join us on a future show? Contact us at foodandwineinsider.com. Until next time, have a passion for food, wine, and profits, and think of our program, Food and Wine Insider.